From the National Catholic Register, this is Register Radio, bringing light and clarity to the news and topics that affect your life.
This week on Register Radio, Jeanette Melo talks with the Register's Middle East correspondent, Michele Chabin, about Pope Francis's trip to the Holy Land this weekend.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Michele, you've been very busy in these past few weeks. You've been covering the news of the Pope's visit to the Holy Land for a number of different newspapers and outlets, and we're so grateful to have you covering it for the Register. So thank you so much for doing this work for us.
I'm really happy to.
Michele, in the past few weeks leading up to Pope Francis's visit to the Holy Land, there have been some protests, especially anti-Christian graffiti in some of the Catholic sites, including the center where Pope Francis is staying, as well as demonstrations at the Cenacle. Who's protesting and why?
Okay, first of all, let's distinguish between two things. You mentioned the attacks. The Israeli police say these attacks, which have been against church property, but also against property belonging to Arabs, against mosques, against liberal synagogues, and even against army bases, are being carried out by a small group of Jewish ultranationalists. These are the same types of people who want to establish tiny Jewish settlements on hilltops in the West Bank.
Okay.
They are politically far right-wing, and they are definitely extremists. These extremists are angry at the Israeli government for demolishing Jewish settlements and limiting the expansion of new ones.
Okay.
By committing so-called price tag attacks, they're trying to embarrass the Israeli government in the eyes of the world, while at the same time telling Israel's minorities, this is a Jewish country, you aren't welcome here. Wow. Their actions and beliefs obviously do not represent the actions and beliefs of the vast majority of the Israeli people,
right.
Including the Jews. You also mentioned the demonstrations taking place over the Cenacle, which is the room of the Last Supper. Pope Francis, will be holding a mass there. Okay. There are some ultra-Orthodox Jews, again, who are extremists, who don't want Christians praying in the Cenacle because the Cenacle is located physically directly above David's tomb, where many Jews believe the biblical King David is buried. They feel that giving the church more access to the Cenacle will in some way make David's tomb ritually impure or unfit for Jewish prayer.
Okay.
These extremists are demonstrating because they've heard rumors that the Israeli government is preparing to give control or even sovereignty of the Cenacle to the Vatican during Pope Francis's visit. But that's something that both the Israeli and Catholic Church officials adamantly deny. Monsignor William Shamali, the auxiliary bishop in Jerusalem, personally assured me a few days ago that the church is simply seeking permission to hold prayers at the Cenacle 2 hours every morning before pilgrims arrive. There's no talk of control or sovereignty.
Well, thank you for those clarifications because, sometimes in the news that we get, we don't quite understand the issues, but you being there on the ground is really very, very helpful. You've lived in the Holy Land for 20 years, and that's a long time. More than that. So you know the people there in a very particular way because they're your neighbors. How are your neighbors responding? How are the local people, not these extremists, how are they responding to the Holy Father's trip?
Well, as you know, Jerusalem is a very diverse city. It's home to all kinds of people, Christians, Muslims, Jews, others, and everyone, of course, has their own opinion. I would say for Christians, this is an extremely exciting event. They feel that the Pope's visit, short though it is shorter than previous papal visits, is a sign of solidarity with them. First of all, it brings tourists, it brings pilgrims, it brings the business, and financially they suffer when they don't have business. But more than that, they feel very often that they are forgotten. They represent just less than 2% of the population in Israel and also in the Palestinian-ruled West Bank, what many call Palestine. Yes. So they really, really appreciate this visit more than I can say. The Jews and the Muslims, they pretty much are taking it in stride. I think Jewish Jerusalemites are not happy with the traffic delays and the reroutings, just like New Yorkers don't appreciate it so much when there are dignitaries visiting the United Nations. But at the same time, Jews understand that the Pope is a spiritual leader of the Catholics and also a very important figure in the entire Christian world. And they respect him for who he is, and they've also heard that he's a very good and kind and modest man, and they have said that a lot. Muslims, both in Jerusalem and in the West Bank, are also very excited about the visit because Christians and Muslims live very close together, and most 80% of the Holy Land's Christians are, in fact, Arab, so they feel that solidarity and that unity with the visit.
This is Jeanette Melo. I'm on Register Radio, and I'm speaking to Michele Chabin from Jerusalem, who's talking to us about Pope Francis's visit to the Holy Land. Now, Michele, I do want to ask you about Pope Francis's trip itself. He's there from the 24th through the 26th of May. He's going to many, many places. His schedule's jam-packed, but I do want to know, what are some of the highlights of his trip?
Well, the first leg of the Pope's visit is Jordan, where he will meet the King of Jordan and his wife at the royal palace in Amman. Very importantly, the Pope will be holding a Holy Mass at a stadium in Amman, and I just read that 1,200 Catholic children will be baptized at that time.
Wow.
So, you know what? I have to go back. The first leg of the Pope's visit is Jordan, where he will meet with the royal family in Amman. He will hold a Holy Mass at the International Stadium in Amman, and 1,200 Catholic children will celebrate communion during the Mass.
Wow.
Early Sunday, on May 25th, he'll be flying, I think, by helicopter to Bethlehem, where he will be meeting with Palestinian leaders before holding a Holy Mass in Major Square in Bethlehem.
Okay.
The Mass is actually intended for Holy Land Christians, some of whom will be arriving from Nazareth in Israel, because the Pope will not be holding a Mass in Israel itself.
Okay.
Pope Francis will then have a private visit to the Grotto of the Nativity in Bethlehem, which is, as we know, grottos are, is an underground cave.
Right.
Very importantly, the Pope very much wants to show respect to local Palestinians, both Muslim and Christian, and will be meeting with Palestinian children of both faiths at the Dheisheh refugee camp, which is in Bethlehem. And he will also be having lunch. He'll be hosting Palestinian families. The final leg of the visit will be in Israel, where the Pope will, again, meet with Israel's leaders. Like other Israeli heads of state, he'll visit the Yad Vashem Holocaust Memorial, and he'll pray at the Western Wall. He will also meet with the Muslim Grand Mufti of Jerusalem and chief rabbis. I have to say that Israel has scheduled the visit. It's only a one-day visit, really, 1.5 days, with so many ceremonies, the kinds of things that other dignitaries do, that there's not a whole lot of time for Pope Francis to be meeting, with local people, unfortunately.
Right. Sure.
I assume that in the future maybe he'll be coming back. The Pope will be spending time with priests, seminary students, and others connected to the Catholic Church. And I can say that the Catholic Church is very, very fortunate to have a wonderful seminary in the town of Beit Jala, which is right next to Bethlehem, which prepares seminarians for service in both the Holy Land and abroad. And the students are from Jordan, Lebanon, Palestine, and I believe there's even one from Israel.
Well, like I said, it's really a jam-packed schedule, but one of the most important meetings of the trip, in fact, it's the reason he's making this trip, is the 50th anniversary of a meeting that happened between the Ecumenical Patriarch Athenagoras and Paul VI. Now, the Holy Father, our current Holy Father, is going to be meeting with the Patriarch Bartholomew I. So tell us, what's the significance of this meeting?
The meeting that this visit now is commemorating was frankly unprecedented. Pope Paul was the first pope then, since the 9th century, to refer to the Eastern churches as sister churches. It was an important gesture that Pope Paul went to Jerusalem to meet the Ecumenical Patriarch, and that the Ecumenical Patriarch did not need to travel to Rome. This was an unprecedented act of unity that led to the cancellation of the excommunications of the Great Schism of 1054. This historic meeting paved the way for greater mutual respect between the Vatican and the Eastern churches. And they had been somewhat estranged, and maybe that's an understatement.
Right.
Over the past 50 years, the message has been clear. Theologically, there are few differences between us. The Vatican is saying, let's find the common denominator, the common ground, and foster unity. And that's exactly what's been happening, slowly but surely. They're not there yet, but it's a very, very, very important step in the right direction.
Sure. And since Paul VI, Pope John Paul II, and Pope Benedict have made strides in this ecumenical relationship with the Patriarch, and now we are seeing just the furthering of that. Patriarch Bartholomew actually went to the installation mass of Pope Francis. So this is something that we're really looking forward to seeing, the continuation of this relationship that has begun, in 1964. Now, another very, very interesting thing, we only have just 1 minute left, but a very interesting thing to note is the travel companions of Pope Francis this very short trip. So tell us who he's traveling with.
The two men joining Pope Francis, are friends with whom the Pope frequently collaborated when he was the Archbishop of Buenos Aires, Rabbi Abraham Skorka. He is either the rector or the former rector of the Latin American Rabbinical Seminary in Buenos Aires, and Sheikh Omar Aboud, a former Secretary General of the Islamic Center of Argentina. They know the Pope, and the Pope knows them from his days as the Archbishop of Buenos Aires, and even before. They shared many good meals. Rabbi Skorka spoke to some journalists yesterday, and I was there. And they have studied together and debated theology together, and that they have often talked a lot about Argentinian football teams. According to everyone associated with the trip, this is a tremendous statement also of good relations, of goodwill. The Vatican spokesman, Reverend Federico Lombardi, said it was the first time that leaders of other faiths are part of an official papal delegation.
Right, so it's historic.
Lombardi said the aim is to send an extremely strong and explicit signal about interfaith dialogue and the normality of having friends of other religions.
Well, we're really looking forward to the rest of the coverage of this important trip, that historic aspect, his travel companions, his meeting with the Ecumenical Patriarch. The Register actually has 3 journalists who are covering this, you, Michelle, and we also have Peter Smith, who's our staff writer who's over there, and Marge Fenlon, who'll be blogging for us and writing a travel log. So the Register really has a lot of coverage of this. We hope our listeners will follow. And Michelle, we're very, very grateful for your work, your constant work there in the Holy Land. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, and Godspeed.